My brother smiled under the chandelier and whispered, Mara, don't embarrass us. We gave your pain a purpose. I looked at my face on the giant screen and said, No, Bennett, you gave it a price tag. You never served, my father said in court. You stole a real veteran's story. I didn't cry. I handed my lawyer the sealed Kandahar file. 2 hours later, Dad's campaign manager called me 47 times, begging me not to release the rest. I arrived with rain on my coat and sanitizer on my hands. The Whitaker Veterans Promise Gala glowed through the hotel windows, all valet tickets, white wine, and women in pearls, pretending generosity had no price. My mother said it would mean so much to the family, which meant it would help my father look good. Then the lights dimmed. Soft piano filled the ballroom. A video showed veterans in VFW caps, folded flags, grateful families. Then, my own deployment photo appeared 20 feet high. I stopped walking. I was 26 in that picture, dusty in Kandahar, a medic bag across my chest. I had kept one copy inside an old paperback. I did not know how my family had found it. Under my face, white letters read, For the warriors who can no longer speak for themselves. But I was standing right there. Patricia stood near the stage in a champagne dress, one hand on her heart, wearing the holy look she saved for fundraisers. Richard Whitaker, my father, watched the donors instead of the screen. Silver hair, tailored suit, campaign smile. Bennett waited near the bar with a smile that never reached his eyes. The Whitakers knew how to arrange a room around a story. Richard controlled facts. Patricia turned pity into applause. Bennett inherited both talents and added invoices. I left their white-columned house at 18 and joined the Army. Richard told me not to embarrass the family. Patricia looked away. Bennett laughed and said a uniform did not make anyone brave. The Army was where Whitaker meant nothing. I came home with private nightmares and took a job helping veterans fight paperwork and memories that did not care what time it was. I did not ask my family for a monument. I did not give them permission to build one out of me. Bennett reached me before I reached the stage. Ellie, he said. That nickname meant he wanted me smaller. Take a breath. Get my picture off that screen. His jaw tightened, then smoothed into his donor smile. This is not the place. This is exactly the place. A woman lifted her pledge card. A news camera turned toward my mother, who dabbed at one dry eye. Applause rolled through the ballroom, warm and wrong. Bennett leaned closer. We are helping people like you. People like me. He said it as if I were a broken exhibit, as if my body had arrived, but my consent had not. I looked from the screen to the donation table, then to the banner carrying my family name above the word veterans. Then show me where the money goes, I said. For 1 second, his smile broke. In that second, I understood the gala was not the beginning of anything. It was the receipt. The Whitaker house sat on a quiet street where lawns were trimmed before Sunday service and every porch flag looked freshly pressed. From the outside, we were the kind of family people trusted without asking many questions. My father, Richard Whitaker, had been a prosecutor before he became the kind of attorney judges greeted by first name. He wore navy suits, drove a black Cadillac, and believed silence was better than an inconvenient truth. At dinner, he did not ask how we felt. He asked how things would look. My mother, Patricia, was softer in public. She chaired church luncheons, delivered casseroles to grieving widows, and knew which donor preferred unsweet tea. People called her gracious. At home, her kindness had a closing time. Bennett was 4 years older than me and born fluent in approval. He knew when to laugh at Dad's jokes, when to compliment Mom's table settings, when to say sir with just enough respect to sound raised right. He collected praise the way other boys collected baseball cards. I collected corrections. Stand straighter, Mara. Smile nicer, Mara. Don't answer like that, Mara. Don't make your father repeat himself. In our house, Mara meant trouble was still fixable. Young lady meant I had embarrassed someone. And when Bennett called me Ellie, it meant he wanted me shoved back into the role he preferred, the restless little sister who did not understand how good she had it. But I understood plenty. I understood that Mom could cry over a stranger's hardship at church, then walk past my bedroom when I was 12 and sobbing because Bennett had told half his friends I was adopted as a joke. I understood that Dad could argue justice in a courtroom, then tell me fairness was a childish word when it came to family. By 17, I knew the Whitaker name was not a shelter, it was a frame, and I did not fit inside it. The Army recruiter's office smelled like burnt coffee, printer ink, and floor cleaner. It was not glamorous. That was part of why I trusted it. Nobody there asked me to be charming. Nobody cared whether Patricia Whitaker approved of my blouse. They asked if I could show up, follow through, and hold steady under pressure. I signed before I told my parents. The morning I left, I carried one duffel bag down the staircase. Mom stood in the kitchen with a ceramic mug she had not tasted. Bennett leaned against the doorway in his college sweatshirt, grinning like he had been waiting for the punchline. Dad sat in his leather chair with a newspaper folded across his knee. I waited for him to stand. He did not. "Don't embarrass us," he said. That was my goodbye. Mom looked into her coffee. Bennett gave a short laugh and said, "A uniform doesn't turn a Whitaker mistake into a hero." I should have cried. Maybe a better daughter would have. I just picked up my bag. Outside, the air was already warm, heavy with Carolina summer. I walked to the curb before the first tear came, and by then, nobody in that house could see it. That was the last gift they gave me before the Army. They taught me how to leave without looking back. Basic training did not care that I was Richard Whitaker's daughter. Nobody paused because my mother hosted charity teas or because Bennett had a polished resume. The drill sergeant called me Whitaker. Then whatever came fastest when I was late with my boots. It was the first place where being nobody's favorite felt like freedom. I learned to sleep when sleep was available, eat what was handed to me, and keep moving when fear climbed into my throat. The Army did not make me fearless. It taught me that fear could ride beside you and still not get to steer. Outside Kandahar, that lesson became flesh. The morning started with dust, real dust. It coated your teeth, got behind your sunglasses, and turned sweat into grit under your collar. Our convoy carried medical supplies, personnel, and one legal liaison who treated a hard case of documents like a newborn child. Her name was Harriet Sloan. She was sharp, gray-eyed, and stubborn enough to make me respect her before lunch. She tapped the case and said, "If anything happens, the report log stays with me." I said, "Ma'am, if anything happens, you stay breathing first." She did not smile. Both can be true. The blast came before noon. One second, there was engine noise and radio chatter. The next, there was white heat, thrown metal, screaming, and a pressure that punched through my chest. Training does not erase panic. It gives your hands a job while panic tries to own the room. I hit the ground. My ears rang so badly the shouting sounded underwater. A tire burned. Someone yelled for a medic. I found my bag and followed the blood. Harriet lay near the road, one shoulder torn open, her face gray under the dust. Her fingers were locked around that hard case. "Report log," she kept saying. "Look at me," I told her. "Don't lose it." "Ma'am, if you bleed out, that log can file its own complaint." Her mouth twitched. A joke meant she was still with me. I packed the wound, pressed hard, and felt blood warm my gloves. She tried to turn toward the case again, so I leaned close. "You stay here, Harriet. You hear me?" Her eyes snapped to mine. "You know my first name?" "You yelled it at 3 people before breakfast." This time, she almost laughed. Then her eyes rolled, and I tapped her cheek harder than kindness allowed. "No, ma'am, not yet." I remember calling out vitals. I remember the medevac bird beating the air into violence. I remember promising the case would go with her before her fingers opened. Later, pieces of that day went into reports. Some lines stayed hidden. Civilian searches would never tell the whole story. But Harriet Sloan breathed because I had been there. And years later, when my family tried to make America believe I had invented my own life, that dusty road waited in the record, patient as a loaded gun. Coming home felt like stepping into a room where everyone had agreed not to mention the smoke. At the airport, Mom hugged me with her fingertips. Dad checked his watch before baggage claim. Bennett had not come. Patricia said he had an important meeting, as if my return was a dentist appointment he had missed. In the car, Dad asked whether my health coverage was sorted out. Not how I slept, not whether I was scared, not what it had cost me to stand in places people saw on the news. "Your mother has a luncheon Thursday," he said. "People may ask about you. Keep it simple." Simple. That was what the Whitakers wanted from war. A clean photo. A daughter who could say she served, then smile before details made anyone uncomfortable. At dinner, Patricia watched me cut one bite of chicken casserole into pieces too small to matter. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said. I waited for more. There was no more. Bennett walked in late, phone in hand, cologne entering before he did. He looked at me like a package returned without a receipt. "So what now?" he asked. "You gonna keep doing the Army thing forever?" "I'm looking at veteran support work." He laughed softly. "Helping people fill out forms?" Dad set down his fork. "It would not hurt you to find something stable." I stared at my plate and heard rotors that were not there. That night, a car backfired 2 streets over. I hit the floor before I knew I had moved. My shoulder struck the dresser. The house went silent. Then Bennett's voice came through the wall. "Jesus, Mara, drama queen much?" Nobody knocked. By morning, I understood. My family had not been waiting for me to come home. They had been waiting for a version of me that never existed. I moved out 3 weeks later. My first apartment sat above a hardware store near the river. Pipes complained in winter. Windows rattled when trucks crossed the bridge. I bought secondhand plates and blackout curtains. For the first time, every sound in the room belonged to me. The clinic hired me for intake and peer support. Men in faded caps sat beside women who kept their backs to the wall. Some wanted benefits. Some wanted someone to believe they were not lying about pain nobody could see. I knew that look. I learned the forms, phone numbers, and the language of denial letters. I sat with widows searching for discharge papers. I taught younger vets how to get through fireworks season. I was not healed. Healing was not a finish line. Some mornings, my hands shook before I unlocked my office. Some nights, I slept with the lamp on. But I paid my rent. I showed up. I built a small life out of honest work and locked doors. They did not call to ask who I was becoming, so I stopped waiting for them to care. Grant Hayes first came into my office carrying 2 coffees and appeal forms. He had the calm look of a man who never raised his voice because people leaned in when he lowered it. Navy tie, rolled sleeves, wedding ring finger bare. 38 with a soft Carolina accent that made bad news sound less sharp. "You're Mara Whitaker?" he asked. Depends who's asking. Grant Hayes, Civil Legal Clinic. I help veterans wrestle the VA when paperwork acts bigger than people. That should have made me laugh. Instead, it made me listen. He was there for a Vietnam vet whose disability rating had been cut after one rushed exam. Grant sat beside the old man and explained every page before asking for a signature. When the man's hand shook, Grant slid the pen closer and waited without turning the silence into pity. At the clinic, kindness was often noisy. People said thank you for your service like dropping a coin in a jar. Grant did not say it once. He said, "Let's get this fixed." Over the next months, I saw him twice a week. He argued with agencies in a tone so polite it could bruise. With me, he never pushed. If a door slammed and my hand jumped, he kept talking. If I lost my place in a form, he circled the line and said, "Happens to everybody." He never asked what I had seen or why I kept my desk facing the door. One evening, I found him heating leftover chili. Rain tapped the window. "You look like you forgot to eat," he said. "I remember. I just negotiate badly with my stomach." He handed me a paper bowl. "Then consider this a settlement offer." It was cheap grocery store chili. It tasted better than it had any right to. That was how he got close. Not with roses, with usefulness. He helped organize my VA letters when a deadline tangled with bad sleep. He showed me how to request records without getting buried in the portal. He walked me to my truck during a thunderstorm, because thunder and I had history we did not discuss. Once, after I snapped at him for touching a folder, I apologized too hard. He waited until I ran out of words. "Mara," he said, "you're not broken. You're surviving." No one in my family ever made survival sound honorable. By the second year, he knew my coffee order and the distance I preferred between a chair and a wall. He also knew which Sunday service Patricia attended and how to make Richard Whitaker laugh at a courthouse reception. I should have noticed that part. We married in a small church outside Raleigh, with hydrangeas by the steps and barbecue behind the hall. My parents came dressed like donors. Bennett shook Grant's hand for a long time. "Welcome to the family," Bennett said. Grant glanced at me, then back at him. "I'll do my best." I heard devotion. Years later, I would remember the pause before he said it. Not love, not loyalty, his best. For the first year, marriage looked like rescue. Grant made eggs before my clinic shifts. On July 4th, he drove me to a cabin 2 counties away so fireworks would sound distant. Women at church told me I was blessed. Maybe I was. The change came softly enough that I kept forgiving it. He asked to be listed as my emergency contact. That made sense. Then he asked for permission to speak with my therapist. Only if something happens. That sounded practical. He offered to keep a copy of my VA paperwork in his office. "You carry too much alone," he said. I wanted that to be love. When he suggested a joint account, he framed it as convenience. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, copays. Married things. He still left my paycheck alone, so I did not argue. Then he started opening mail. Only the important stuff, he said. Only because deadlines could trigger my anxiety. When I changed the password to my medical portal, he looked hurt, not angry. "Mata, I'm not your father," he said. That sentence worked because he knew exactly where to place it. I gave him the new password. By our second anniversary, Grant had become the keeper of small gates. He knew when my refills were due. He answered clinic calls if I was in the shower. He corrected my memory with such gentle certainty that I began writing things down just to prove the day had happened the way I remembered. If I objected, he lowered his voice. "Stress makes symptoms worse. You've been sleeping badly. I'm trying to protect you." Protect. That word followed me from room to room. One evening, I found him at the kitchen table with my old service file spread beside his laptop. My chest tightened. "Why do you have that?" He did not flinch. "Your father asked a question about benefit eligibility for a donor packet. I wanted to make sure nobody described anything incorrectly." "My father asked you?" "He asked the family attorney and me, not the husband." There it was, a door I had never seen, closing. I reached for the folder. Grant put 2 fingers on top of it, not enough to stop me by force, just enough to remind me he could. "You don't need to put yourself through this tonight," he said. I looked at his hand, then at the folder with my name printed on the tab. Like even my history had been filed beyond my reach. "Grant," I said, "move your hand." And for the first time since I had known him, the kindness left his face before the smile did. He lifted his fingers. I locked the file in my grandmother's cedar chest. The key shook in my hand. Downstairs, Grant washed dishes as if nothing had happened. That was when I began to understand the trap. It was not made of shouting. It was made of favors, passwords, soft warnings, and doors he kept saying he opened for me. The first time I heard the name Whitaker Veterans Promise, I was washing coffee mugs in the clinic break room. Patricia's voice floated from the television above the vending machine, warm as a hymn and twice as practiced. "No veteran should come home feeling unseen," she said. I turned. There she stood at a podium in a cream suit, a small American flag pinned near her shoulder. Behind her was my father, chin lifted, eyes already measuring the room. Bennett stood on the other side, smiling like a man whose pockets had learned to breathe. The lower third graphic called it a new family-led initiative supporting veterans with PTSD and their loved ones. Family-led. I almost laughed. A nurse beside me said, "That's your mom, right? Good for her." I nodded because my mouth had gone dry. At first, I told myself not to be bitter. Maybe they had finally found a decent use for all that social polish. Maybe some veteran would get rent help or transportation to appointments. Maybe a spouse drowning in paperwork would find a phone number that worked. Then the brochures arrived at the clinic. Glossy paper, navy and gold lettering, my father's quote on duty, my mother's quote on compassion, Bennett's quote on efficient community impact, which sounded like a man shaking hands with himself. And there, on the inside fold, was a cropped photo of me in uniform. Not my name, not my permission, just my face, young and dusty, beside a paragraph about families carrying the burden when warriors could no longer carry their own stories. I read it twice, hoping the second time would make it less ugly. It did not. Grant found me holding the brochure in my office doorway. "They probably meant it as an honor," he said. "An honor usually asks before it takes." He sighed the way people sigh when they want to sound patient and disappointed at the same time. "Mara, your family has reach. This could help people." "Well, then why does it need my face?" He did not answer fast enough. Over the next few weeks, Whitaker Veterans Promise appeared everywhere. Church bulletins, local news, Facebook posts with folded flags and soft focus handshakes. Patricia visited women's groups and spoke about loving someone through invisible wounds. Richard attended every event like the campaign had already begun. Bennett announced vendor partnerships and consulting plans with words thick enough to hide behind. A volunteer left a printed program on my desk one afternoon. I read the sponsor page during lunch. Bennett's private consulting company was listed under program operations. Another company handled media strategy. Its mailing address matched an office suite Bennett used downtown. A gala venue had been booked for more money than our clinic spent on winter outreach. I started a folder. Not because I wanted war with my family. I had already lived through one. I started it because numbers have a way of telling the truth when people dress lies in good lighting. Grant noticed the folder 2 days later. "You're going to make yourself sick," he said. "I'm going to make myself informed." His hand rested on the back of my chair. Not heavy, not gentle either. "Nonprofit accounting is complicated," he said. "You could misunderstand something and do real damage." I looked up at him. To whom? For a moment, there was no husband in his eyes, only counsel. He stepped back and adjusted his cuffs. To everyone. That night, I searched the foundation website. My photograph sat on the donation page above a red button that said, "Give Hope Today." My family had not just taken my silence, they had made it tax deductible. Patricia found me near the silent auction table, between a signed Panthers helmet and a weekend at a lake house in Asheville. "Mara," she said, low enough that only I could hear. "Not tonight." Her hand touched my elbow. In public, she always touched gently. It made witnesses feel safe. "You used my picture," I said. Her smile stayed fixed. "Sweetheart, people connect with a real face. A real face should get a real choice." A donor couple drifted close. Paper plates balanced with prime rib and roasted vegetables. Patricia turned half an inch toward them and became Mrs. Whitaker again. "My daughter served," she said, voice trembling on command. "Some wounds follow our heroes home." The woman touched her pearls. "Bless your heart." In North Carolina, that could mean kindness or a slap with perfume on it. This one felt like both. I walked away before my mother could wrap me in her speech. Richard stood near the pledge cards, shaking hands with men who knew judges, sheriffs, and county chairs. Everyone called him Mr. Whitaker, unless they wanted something. Then they called him Richard. He saw me coming and adjusted his cufflinks. "Not here," he said. "You keep saying that, but you put me here." His eyes hardened. "This event supports veterans. It supports your campaign shadow." A smile snapped onto his face as a local reporter passed behind me. "You are tired. Grant should take you home." There it was again. My husband as leash. My father as owner of the room. Bennett intercepted me by the hallway to the restrooms. He smelled like bourbon and expensive soap. "Ellie, you're spiraling." "My name is Mara." "Fine, Mara." He said it like he was doing charity. "You think you're the only person with pain? Grow up. We built something useful out of yours." I looked past him into the ballroom. Gold tablecloths, flag pins, dessert trays with pecan tartlets arranged like little medals. My younger face still glowed on the screen. "You didn't build for my pain," I said. "You rented it out." His nostrils flared. For 1 second, I saw the brother who had shoved me into old roles all my life. Then the consultant returned. "Careful," he said. "People love a wounded veteran. They're less patient with an unstable one."
Nếu bạn đang nghe đến đây và thấy Mara không nên im lặng nữa, hãy để lại một lượt thích và bình luận lời khuyên cho cô ấy. Phía sau còn một cú lật khiến cả nhà Whitaker không kịp trở tay. Liệu Mara sẽ đánh vào trái tim hay đánh thẳng vào hồ sơ của họ? I went home before dessert. Grant followed 20 minutes later, loosening his tie in the kitchen like a man returning from a difficult meeting, instead of the room where his wife had been publicly gutted. "You embarrassed them," he said. I was at the table with my laptop open. "No," I said. "They embarrassed themselves. I just noticed." He glanced at the screen. Annual filings, vendor pages, public charity documents, event sponsors. I had learned enough clinic paperwork to know when numbers avoided plain English. A program operations fee went to Bennett's consulting firm. A media strategy contract went to a company in the same downtown suite.
Community engagement expenses look swollen enough to need a cardiologist. The gala budget alone could have paid months of rides for veterans who missed appointments because they could not afford gas.
Grant shut the refrigerator without taking anything out.
Mara, nonprofit accounting is not a hobby. Well, neither is using my face to raise money. You could destroy your family over a misunderstanding. I looked at him then, really looked. Would you be this calm if they used your face? He did not answer. That silence was my answer. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Consent and Funds. Then I saved every page before anyone in that ballroom remembered the internet could change by morning. Outside, the rain had stopped. The gutters still dripped, steady as a clock. By Monday morning, I had slept 2 hours and made coffee strong enough to scare a nurse. The folder on my laptop had grown teeth. Screenshots, donation pages, vendor names, filing dates. A copy of the brochure from the clinic with my face folded into a story I had never agreed to tell. I did not write angry. That mattered. Anger was what they wanted from me. Anger could be photographed, quoted, softened into concern, then used to prove I was unstable. So I sat at my kitchen table, feet flat on the floor, and wrote like Naomi would later teach me to think, even though I had not met her yet. Clear facts, clear request. No threats dressed as emotion. To the board of Whitaker Veterans Promise, I formally object to the use of my name, image, military history, medical condition, and personal story in fundraising materials, public statements, donor communications, and online content without my written consent. I requested removal within 5 business days. I requested records showing when my image was obtained, who approved its use, and what fundraising materials referenced me directly or indirectly. I requested financial documents tied to campaigns using my likeness. Then I sent it to the foundation's public email, Bennett's business account, my father's law office, and the registered address listed in the charity filing. Grant watched from the hallway. "You should have let me review that," he said. "You had time to review my life." His face closed, not loudly. That was Grant's talent. He could turn cold without changing temperature. The first reply came from Bennett. 1 sentence. Received. Do not contact staff directly again. The second came from Patricia, sent from her personal account just before midnight. Mara, sweetheart, this is painful for everyone. Your father is trying to prevent damage you may not fully understand. No apology, no denial, just velvet wrapped around a warning. Richard did not email. He filed. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy came to the clinic. Not to my apartment, not to my mailbox, to my workplace, where veterans waited under fluorescent lights and pretended not to stare. Mara Hayes? My stomach knew before my hands did. The envelope was thick. My father's name was on the complaint as plaintiff, along with Whitaker Veterans Promise. My own name sat on the other side like an accusation. The lawsuit said I had made false and damaging claims about the foundation. It said I had misrepresented elements of my military history. It said my threats to expose financial misconduct had harmed donor confidence, family reputation, and public trust. Then came the part meant to cage me. They asked the court for an injunction, blocking me from speaking publicly about the charity while the case moved forward. My father had not raised his voice. He had not slammed a door. He had put a muzzle in a legal brief. By 5 o'clock, the local news had the story. Patricia stood outside our church with her pearls, her soft gray coat, and a face built for sympathy. "We love our daughter," she told the camera, "but we cannot allow a dangerous falsehood to harm real veterans who need help." Real veterans. I stood in the clinic break room, watching my mother erase me in a sentence. Grant came home late. He placed his briefcase by the stairs and spoke before removing his coat. Your father's trying to contain this. I turned from the sink. He's suing his daughter. He's protecting the foundation. And you? Grant looked tired, but not surprised. That hurt more than anger would have. I'm trying to keep you from making it worse, he said. I laughed once. It sounded nothing like me. My father just called me a liar in court. My mother called me dangerous on television, and my husband is worried I might make it worse. Grant stepped closer. Mara, no, don't soften my name when you're helping them bury it. For the first time, he did not tell me I was overreacting. He only looked away. The courthouse smelled like floor wax, old paper, and coffee burned past saving. I wore a navy dress Patricia once said made me look almost polished. I hated that I remembered. My hands were steady because I had forced them to be. In my bag were copies of my email, the brochure, and the charity pages I had saved before anyone could edit them. Grant drove separately. He said it would look cleaner. I sat behind my attorney for that morning, a woman assigned through a rushed referral who kept whispering that emergency injunction hearings moved fast. Across the aisle, Richard looked perfectly rested. Patricia sat behind him with a tissue folded in her palm. Bennett leaned back like the room belonged to him. Then Grant walked in. For one breath, my body relaxed. He did not come to my side. He crossed the aisle and sat behind my father's table. Something inside me went quiet. Richard's lawyer stood first. He did not call me a fraud outright. He was too skilled for that. He said there were serious inconsistencies in my public claims, limited civilian verification of certain service details, and escalating conduct that threatened a charitable organization serving vulnerable veterans. Then he used the phrase that would follow me for weeks: alleged stolen valor. The words did not shout. They landed clean and professional, which made them uglier. My attorney objected. The judge allowed him to continue only narrowly. Richard's lawyer smiled as if narrow was all he needed. He introduced an affidavit from Grant Hayes. My husband's statement said I suffered panic episodes, insomnia, memory disruption, and periods of emotional confusion. It said I sometimes described events from deployment in ways that were difficult to reconcile. It said Grant loved me deeply, but believed I was too wounded to understand the damage I was doing. Then he attached a text I had sent at 2:14 one winter morning. Sometimes I don't know what I remember anymore. I remembered sending it. I had been sitting on the bathroom floor, unable to stop shaking after a thunderclap. Grant had held my hand and told me I could tell him anything. Now that sentence was projected in court like proof I could not be trusted with my own life. The judge did not grant everything my father wanted. She limited public statements about specific financial allegations until documents could be reviewed. But the damage had already left the building. Outside, cameras waited. A reporter asked whether I had lied about combat service. Another asked if I had received benefits improperly. I kept walking. By evening, the clinic director called. Her voice was kind in the way people sound when they have already made the decision. Administrative leave, she said, just until things are clarified. I thanked her because dignity sometimes means not begging in front of people who are afraid of bad headlines. At home, Grant stood in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, making tea. Tea. As if my name had not been dragged through court by the man who slept beside me. You used my worst night, no, I said. He set the kettle down. I told the truth. No, you told pieces of it in the order that helped them. His eyes softened, the old trick. Mata, I'm trying to be a responsible witness. I looked at the ring on his hand. You were supposed to be my husband. For once, he had no gentle answer ready. Grant placed the envelope on the dining table beside water I had not touched. There is a path out, he said. He used the voice he saved for frightened clients, low and careful, as if calm could make a trap less sharp. I stood at the sink with dishwater cooling around my hands. Out of what? I asked. Court, the news, this spiral. Spiral. A staircase they kept pushing me down, then blamed me for descending. I dried my hands and opened the envelope. The document was 12 pages. My father's lawyers had polished every sentence until it shone. If I signed, Richard would dismiss the complaint. In return, I would acknowledge that trauma may have caused me to misremember parts of my military history. I would not contact donors, media, regulators, staff, or board members about Whitaker Veterans Promise. I would waive any claim tied to the use of my image, name, service record, or personal story. The last page waited for my signature. I read it twice because betrayal deserves a full hearing. You want me to confess to a lie? I said. Grant sat across from me. No one is using that word. That is why lawyers get paid. His mouth tightened. This protects you. It protects them from discovery. For one clean second, the husband disappeared. The attorney remained. You do not understand what discovery could do to you, he said. I understand what silence has already done. He rubbed his forehead. Mata, please. Your father will withdraw. Bennett will stop pushing. Patricia can calm the donors. We can start over. We? The word caught him. He looked at the paper instead of me. I have been put in an impossible position. No, I said. You walked there. His chair scraped the floor. You are making me choose between being your husband and being a responsible witness. I almost laughed. It came out tired. Grant, I am watching you choose. The room went still. My phone buzzed. Patricia. Sweetheart, a gracious woman knows when to stop fighting before she loses everything. Then Bennett. Sign it, Ellie. Don't confuse attention with vindication. There it was, the family choir in perfect harmony. Shrink, apologize, disappear. I carried the settlement to Grant's office and laid it on his desk, unsigned. Tell my father no. Grant stared at me. Think carefully. I have. You could lose your reputation. They already swung at it. You could lose your job. I'm already on leave. His voice dropped. You could lose this marriage. That one landed because some foolish part of me had still been grieving the man I thought he was. I looked at Grant, at the careful face that once made me feel safe. A marriage that needs me silent to survive is already gone, I said. Something behind his eyes hardened. I walked upstairs before he could make cruelty sound like concern again. Naomi Park's office sat above a bakery on a side street in Durham. The hallway smelled like cinnamon rolls and old carpet. Her name was taped to frosted glass. Legal Aid did not waste money pretending power looked expensive. She was 41, Korean-American, blunt, with glasses on a chain. She did not flinch when I said my father was Richard Whitaker. She only wrote the name on the yellow pad. Start with what they took, she said. So I did. My image, my service story, my medical privacy, my credibility, my husband. Naomi listened without touching her phone. When I finished, she slid the settlement across the desk. This is not peace, she said. This is a confession wearing perfume. I laughed before I could stop myself. She did not smile. Your truth may be real, Mara, but in court, Truth needs a route. Then she built one. She made 3 piles: consent, money, and control. Consent was every brochure, donor email, and photograph used without a clean release. Money was filings, contracts, consultant fees, gala costs, and anything tied to Bennett's company. Control was Grant. That pile was the worst. Naomi asked for dates, not feelings. The day Grant got my medical portal password. The day he became emergency contact. The day he copied my service records. The night I gave the password back because he said he was not my father. She circled that sentence. People tell you what they are doing by what they deny, she said. For 2 hours, we turned my life into a timeline. They had counted on my pain staying shapeless. Naomi gave it columns. The first crack was an electronic consent Grant claimed I signed during a hospital observation visit after a medication reaction. I was checked in across town when my signature appeared. The second came from an email asking the clinic to expand Grant's access. It came from my address, but the header showed an IP tied to his office building. The third came from our joint account. 3 transfers had gone to a community vendor sharing a mailing address with one of Bennett's consulting shells. Naomi sat back. This is not enough to win. It is enough to ask better questions. I wanted to post everything that night, burn the lie in public. Naomi shut that down fast. If you post it, it becomes noise. If we enter it right, it becomes evidence. So I went home and did the hardest thing I had learned since Kandahar. I waited. I bought a scanner. I backed up emails to 2 drives. I photographed envelopes before opening them. I wrote down every call Grant made behind the closed door, every Bennett text, every Bible verse my mother sent with a hook hidden under it. When Grant asked why I had installed the camera in the garage and kitchen entry, I said, for the house. And he looked at the black lens above the door. You don't trust me? I held his gaze. I trust records. Grant had been too quiet all evening. Not angry quiet, planned quiet. I put your winter boots in the garage, he said. You may want them before the storm gets worse. Thunder rolled over the trees. I went down alone. The garage light flickered. Rain tapped the metal door. I found the boots near my army trunk. Beside the trash can lay a kitchen knife, bright against the concrete. We did not keep knives in the garage. Then came the sound. A violent crack slammed through the room, followed by a flash against the side window. My body left the present before my mind could stop it. Kandahar came back in pieces. Heat, dust, metal, somebody screaming for a medic. I dropped beside the trunk. My breath locked. My hands searched for blood that was not there. Mara, Grant shouted. He was in the doorway too fast. I could not answer. I was counting floor scenes, anything that belonged to North Carolina and not Afghanistan. Grant looked at the knife, then at me. His left hand had a red scrape across the knuckles. Oh, God, he said, loudly enough for someone who was not there. He called 911. My wife is having an episode, he said. She's a veteran. PTSD. There's a knife nearby. I'm worried she might hurt herself. I shook my head, but no sound came out. Then he said it. She told me she couldn't do this anymore. Those words were mine, but not like that. I had said them days earlier about being sued and cornered by my own family. Grant had cut the sentence away from its body and carried it into a phone call like evidence. The paramedics were kind. I kept saying, I didn't touch the knife. One said nobody was accusing me, which meant someone already had. At the hospital, a tired doctor asked if I intended to harm myself, if I had threatened Grant, if I was under unusual stress. No. No. Yes, more than they could fit on a form. They did not hold me. There was no legal ground. But by morning, the story had outrun the truth. Local news called it a mental health crisis involving the woman accused in the Whitaker veterans dispute. Bennett posted about praying for families affected by untreated trauma. Grant brought me home at noon and offered soup. I walked past him to my laptop and opened the security app Naomi had told me to install. The garage camera loaded slowly. There he was, Grant, alone, 20 minutes before he sent me downstairs, moving my boots, carrying the knife from the kitchen, opening my pill organizer, switching tablets between compartments, rubbing his own hand against a metal shelf until skin broke. Then he stood under the camera and made a call. The audio was thin, but clear enough. "Bennett," he said, "by morning, she'll look unstable." I watched it twice, not because I doubted what I saw, because the second time, my hands did not shake. Lauren called from a number I did not recognize. At first, she said nothing. I heard rain, a turn signal, and the breath of someone watching her mirrors. "This is Lauren," she said. My sister-in-law had a voice built for junior league luncheons. Polished, careful, never arriving without makeup. That night it shook. "If Bennett sent you, he didn't. Blue Ridge Diner off Highway 70, 20 minutes. Don't bring Grant." The garage video was copied on 2 drives, one sent to Naomi. Grant was downstairs, pretending not to watch me. I left through the side door because my own house no longer felt like mine. Lauren sat in the back booth, baseball cap low, wedding ring turned inward. "I'm not here because I like you," she said. "That makes 2 of us." She slid a flash drive across the table. "Bennett used my signature." "On what?" "Vendor approvals, reimbursements, a business line tied to a company I don't own. He said it was routine board paperwork." She looked toward the rain-striped window. "Then the bank called me, not him." The waitress brought tea. Lauren never touched it. "I found emails," she said. "Bennett wrote Grant that if your attorney got discovery, the foundation would be done before Thanksgiving." My family's schedule ruined around holidays like menu planning. "Why give this to me?" "Because when it blows up, Bennett will say I handled the paperwork. Richard will believe him if it saves his campaign. Patricia will cry on camera and call me fragile." Her mouth hardened. "I'm not brave, Mara. I'm cornered." No apology, no sisterhood, just survival. That made it believable. What else is on it? Emails between Bennett and Grant. Invoices from 3 vendors using 1 mailing address. A spreadsheet Bennett kept off the foundation server. And a voicemail. She met my eyes. "He says your name." She played it low from her phone. Bennett's voice slurred through the speaker. "If Ellie gets discovery, we're finished. Dad can bury her in court, but not if she gets the files. Grant needs to keep her looking crazy until the injunction sticks." Lauren stopped the recording. The diner kept breathing around us. Forks clicked. Rain hit glass. I looked at the woman who had worn the Whitaker name like a diamond bracelet and only now felt the clasp tighten around her wrist. "Naomi will need you to swear to this," I said. "I know. If you back out, they will eat you alive anyway." "I know that too." I zipped the drive inside my jacket. Lauren wrapped both hands around the coat tee. "Bennett always said you were impossible to control." I stood. "No," I said. "He confused control with family." Outside, rain soaked my hair before I reached the truck. For the first time since my father filed that lawsuit, I did not feel hunted. I felt documented. Judge Harriet Sloan entered at 9 sharp. Silver-haired, straight-backed, one shoulder sitting lower than the other. Rich's attorney opened like a man polishing a weapon. He called me fixated, unstable, vindictive. He said my memories of Kandahar remained difficult to verify through ordinary civilian channels. Naomi rose. Your Honor, ordinary channels are not the only channels. Judge Sloan looked down. Counsel, this is not a full merits trial. No, but they are asking to silence my client by attacking her credibility. They cannot swing at her service record and then complain when we bring the record. The judge turned toward me. Miss Hayes, you understand you are under oath. Yes, Your Honor. When you refer to Kandahar, are you referring to a convoy incident involving a legal liaison? My mouth went dry. Yes, ma'am. Was there a report log involved? She kept asking for it. And what did you tell her? For 1 second, I was back in dust and heat. I told her if she bled out, the law could file its own complaint. Judge Sloan looked at me for one long breath. Then she closed the folder. We are in recess. Naomi told me later what happened in chambers. Judge Sloan disclosed that she had reason to believe she was the injured liaison from that convoy. She could not continue without risking a conflict. On the public record, she said only that the matter would be reassigned. That was enough for Richard to perform. By lunch, his team told reporters I had contaminated the court with a battlefield story. Patricia called confusion a poor substitute for truth. Naomi did not chase cameras. She filed. Under Judge Elaine Reeves, Naomi subpoenaed Harriet Sloan as a witness, not a judge. 2 weeks later, Harriet walked in wearing a gray suit with no robe and no bench above her. She carried medical records, a partially released evacuation report, scar photographs, and a military confirmation letter with half its lines blacked out. Richard's attorney tried to make the redaction sound suspicious. Harriet looked at him with surgical patience. Counsel, redacted does not mean imaginary. Then Naomi asked the question that mattered. Who kept you alive until evacuation? Harriet turned toward me. Mara Whitaker Hayes did. The air left the room. She applied pressure to an arterial wound, kept me conscious, and refused to let me drift. I remember her voice because I followed it out. My father stared at the table. Patricia's tissue stopped moving. Bennett's face had gone pale under his tan. Naomi paused. Why are you here today? Harriet looked at the court reporter. I am not here to repay a debt. I am here because the truth deserves a record. For the first time since my father sued me, the room did not look at me like a question. It looked at them. Naomi let Harriet Sloan's testimony settle before she opened the next folder. My father's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Elaine Reeves raised one hand. Counselor, sit down. I want documents. For once, Richard Whitaker had no room to perform. Naomi entered the military confirmation letter, the evacuation report, and the VA eligibility record. Some lines were blacked out, but the truth was not. I had served. I had been there. I had not stolen anyone's story. Then she showed the email Richard received years earlier. It confirmed that parts of my service could not be released through ordinary civilian channels. He had known the record was restricted. He turned that restriction into a weapon. Patricia stared at her tissue. Bennett kept drinking water. Grant looked down. The garage video came next. No shouting, no music. Just Grant moving my boots, placing the knife, opening my pill organizer, and calling Bennett before 911. Then the audio played. By morning, she'll look unstable. Grant's face went gray. Naomi did not raise her voice. Mr. Hayes, Did you love your wife when you forged access to a medical portal? Or only when you used her records? Grant whispered, I was trying to protect her. I answered before fear could stop me. Love does not need a forged signature. Judge Reeves dismissed the civil claims with prejudice. She said the records show litigation used as a muzzle, not a search for truth. She ordered the evidence preserved. Nobody was dragged away in handcuffs. Real consequences are colder than that. Certified letters, ethics complaints, subpoenas, frozen donations. Donors stop smiling when a charity is exposed. Bennett received notice to preserve records before he reached the garage. Patricia lost her charity chair by dinner. Richard's campaign suspended events the next morning. Grant faced a bar complaint and a wife who no longer wore his ring. In the hallway, my father waited for me. You destroyed this family, he said. I looked at the man who had tried to make a courtroom bury his daughter alive. No, I said. I stopped letting this family use me as evidence against myself. 3 months later, I lived near the Western Carolina woods. I returned to veteran support work and started a program for people whose families had used medical files, benefits, trauma, and signatures as chains. Harriet mailed me an old photograph from Kandahar. On the back, she had written 3 words. You were there. I placed it beside my divorce papers and the court order. Not as a trophy, as a witness. The lesson is simple. When people twist your silence into permission, let truth enter the record. If this story moved you, please leave a like for the channel, share your thoughts below, and tell us where you are listening from. Thank you for staying until the end. Stay healthy, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story on Revenge Glow.